right at the climatological peak of hurricane season, but it's unusually quiet out there. This is not unheard of, however, it is very, very unusual. In fact, 60 to 70% of named storms usually form after September 10th every season. Hey there, my name is Eric. I'm an aspiring meteorologist currently working my way towards my atmospheric science degree. Today is September 13th, 2025, and today I'm going to be giving you an analysis on why the tropics have been so quiet and what the current outlook is for the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season, and whether or not we should be worried about any direct impacts going forward. Now, you might remember last week's wave, which the National Weather Service had such high hopes for. In fact, it actually was dubbed a 90% chance of forming into a depression before the National Weather Service ruled it out going into this week. This right here, I believe, was the system as it was heading westward. And as you can see ahead of it, there was a lot of dry air, and that's essentially what it headed directly into. And models further past this point showed it interacting more with that. And by the time the National Weather Service had pretty much downgraded it to like a 40-60% chance, medium chance, I pretty much was kind of confident in my own theory that it wouldn't really become anything, and sure enough, it didn't. That was the one I was covering in the last video. Despite the dry air that it was facing, sea surface temperatures are plenty warm. 27 to 26 is like the threshold for 26 to 27 Celsius, mind you specifically, is the threshold for tropical development. In the main development region, you can see there's actually pretty decent amount of warm water, but again, that dry air was the issue here. As you can see, in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, we have plenty of water that is essentially bath water temperature, and it also goes deep, not just on the surface, so there's plenty of fuel around this area. So the ocean itself here is not really the problem, but I guess I wouldn't really call it a problem because it's nice to not have these devastating storms come in and cause a bunch of issues, because that would be the problem, really. It's not like I want to go and storm chase or anything. So this is where the current wave is, and actually this is a little outdated. It is actually a little further west now, but not really a significant difference. This was from a couple of hours ago or so. What you're seeing here essentially means the wave is located here south of the Cabo Verde, and going further west, once it reaches this highlighted region here, this is the area where it is most likely going to develop, but we will get on into that a little bit more later. So why is it so quiet exactly? Why has this been such an exceptionally weird peak of hurricane season so far? Jumping back to the present, you can see here, looking at the Atlantic, I know it's a little bit hard to see, but over here where I'm drawing this red line is the coast of Africa. Over here is where this other red line is North America. All of this, lighter color, yellow and orange, represents drier air that inhibits tropical development, and that has been present pretty strongly past several weeks. On top of that, we have a stronger than normal Bermuda high, which is allowing in, just because of the way that it's positioned, a lot of that dry air through the main development region, which is this area generally is the main development region, but you can see it's making its way not just in the main development region, but also north of it and then into the main development region. Not only that, but a high pressure system brings anticyclonic sinking, suppressing air, which inhibits tropical cyclone development. The Maddie-Julian oscillation has not been helping either, as rising motion is currently stuck in the Indian Ocean. Now, normally in the Atlantic Basin, tropical cyclones start with waves that come off the coast of Africa, and if the oscillation is stopped at India, you essentially have ahead of that oscillation and the dry cycle over Africa, the dry area. Looking at this illustration from the Weather Channel, you can see the phase that it goes through, and essentially whenever you have the enhanced phase over the Indian Ocean, you have the suppressed phase over in the Atlantic, and it prevents that more upward rising motion of the tropical waves that fuels the tropical waves over Africa, which eventually come west to our position. So that is currently what is happening, and that is the phase that it is in. Right now, that rising motion, like I said, is parked over the Indian Ocean, and so that's kind of influencing, it's drawing more of that rising motion towards the Indian Ocean rather than northwestern Africa. Now let's look ahead. Returning to that wave that I noted earlier that we have present time is currently situated right here. As I said earlier, it is expected to continue this way northwest and develop within this region further north. This overall is that main threat that we need to keep an eye on. As with most of these storms, it is too far out to sea to be certain about it. This is kind of your typical, hey, we got something, it's like 2 weeks out, we don't know exactly where it's going to go, so just keep an eye on it, keep watching updates for it. Now here, looking at the GFS, you can see that wave moving further west and then eventually northwest and becoming a little disorganized cyclone eventually into a weak hurricane or tropical storm, and continues further northwest, getting closer to Bermuda, and it makes its way around the Bermuda High and essentially hugs it and steers around it. By this point, it's actually a pretty strong hurricane. I want to note that this frame that it is at right here, anything beyond this is usually mostly speculative. So most reliable, this is the last most reliable hour that you have. So this is the more likely scenario that you're going to see up until this point. Everything after that is more speculative. So this animation you see here is not as likely to happen, especially as you get later on into the hours. The Euro model shows a similar setup. However, the wave is less quick to develop as it continues moving. What in this case is actually a little bit further west and then directly over Bermuda once it gets its act together. And then it gets taken by the westerlies and shred apart later on. The Euro is generally more accurate long term, but even, in areas beyond this frame here, can still change dramatically as we get closer to that time. So yesterday's GFS run, this was from yesterday evening, you can see that wave moving westward, kind of a similar thing going on here, but following it there was already another wave, you can see there in the middle bottom, that makes its way and trains behind that one, and then a third one that follows behind it. And this, I think, was probably alarming a lot of people, and some creators and weather forecasters on YouTube were using this as a means of hype, honestly. Now, I'm going to show you again in just a second. This right here is the last most reliable frame. Everything beyond this point going forward is less reliable. It can still happen, but not as likely to. Today's GFS model run, those other two storms are not even being shown at all. Going even further back, on September 11th, 2 days ago, the GFS was showing a system moving in that was actually, it thought was going to make landfall somewhere between Texas and Louisiana. This is not present conditions. Again, like I said, this is September 11th. Just want to emphasize that. On September 12th, it showed a weak, probably a weak hurricane hitting the panhandle of Florida. People like Ryan Hall on YouTube were really emphasizing this illustration here. I think because of how quiet it has been. Again, you can see this is hour 312 from yesterday's run. That is not reliable, and it's not super likely to happen. Another thing is that the GFS tends to have this bias towards this area here around the Yucatan and going into the Gulf of Mexico. Going into this time of the year, the Central American gyre, which is actually further down here in this area, starts strengthening. It's essentially a mesoscale convective feature that usually helps to generate spin that assists a lot of tropical cyclones that make their way northwest into the Gulf of Mexico. And, they'll either hit Mexico or they'll hit Texas or Louisiana or Florida and any of the other states. Now, as I said, yesterday's model run was showing that a system was going to come up from about this area in the Bay of Campeche and make its way up into Florida and the southeastern United States. As of now, it is not showing it doing that, but I will actually show you what the current model shows in that particular region. As of now, it is showing that nothing is going to happen in that region, just showers and thunderstorms. However, there is a little area here in the Caribbean that it's spitting out in the very latest forecast hour. So again, not super reliable, but something to keep an eye on. This is kind of, I think, the new version of what we were looking at earlier, and even then this probably won't happen exactly like this. So I'm kind of calling this bias area, I guess me myself, just like the hype bias, and I'll kind of get more into that in a minute and why I'm calling it that. I want to note that the Euro model was not reciprocating these three storms the same way the GFS was. In fact, it wasn't showing any more than just the single wave that we currently have making its way west. Looking at the Euro ensemble, you can see this whole area is that wave that we are actually watching. You can see most of them agree on it becoming a fish storm. Some of it takes it probably a little further west than we would like, but the most likely scenario would be a fish storm. Still something, like I said, to keep an eye on since it is so far out. The Euro does even show something happening here, coming from where that Central American gyre is over here, potentially, but it only has about one consistent plot. With the GFS, you're seeing mostly the same thing. It just goes out to sea, going more northeast once it makes that, after it makes that northward turn past the main development region. And then you can see with the GFS, that bias I was talking about, how it tends to favor this area, and it thinks that something is going to come up from the Caribbean, past the Yucatan into the Gulf. Looks like you even have something running up along here into Florida, and that might be a remnant of what it was expecting before. So just keep in mind these are possibilities, but like this area especially is like a bias, and the greater length of a lot of these models is too far out to be certain about it. Wind shear mostly looks good going ahead with this on the Euro model, and there's actually a bit of diffluence happening, although some shear to the north. And again, I think the reason why the Euro is confident on it not developing so quickly is because of the amount of dry air that's being flushed into the Atlantic, and you can see that wave moving forward, and on the whole western half of it, there's just dry air in its core, and it can't really do anything. It doesn't become symmetrical enough because of that. So there's where the system ends up in the latest hour of the Euro model. Like I said, most plots show it taking a course like this. It's kind of similar to how Aaron did earlier. Some say it'll go over Bermuda. Most agree that it'll go further east. So good idea for Bermuda residents to keep an eye on that or interested in that area. Less likely that it will make it into a more westward track towards the United States, but still worth keeping an eye on. Even if it were to go further west, it's not really going to have a lot of conducive environment to work with until if it made it into the Caribbean and the Gulf, because right now there is just so much dry air in the main development region, which is keeping that development from happening. Climatologically, the main development region starts simmering down going into late September, but the Caribbean and the Gulf start heating up. The Central American gyre is expected to strengthen within the next 2 weeks, and that can become the breeding ground for a lot of these future storms going into the late season. So we want to start monitoring that area for development. But the current storms, this sort of ghost storms that we've been seeing over the past couple of days on these model runs, are not yet to be taken seriously because of how far out it is. And you're also noting how every single day it's something different. Like I said before, it was something hitting Mexico, and then something hitting Texas, Louisiana area, and then it was Florida, and now it's no consolidated storm at all. So don't pay attention to that yet. Just keep an eye on it on a daily basis. Just be aware. There is no reason to panic right now. But again, just anytime during the hurricane season, just have your plan figured out. Start making preparations once things are much closer, like, at least probably about 5 days out, when the forecast becomes more reliable and you see you're in the cone of uncertainty in any given storm that makes its way. But right now we don't have anything like that. All right, so something I want to talk about next is kind of an interesting behavior you see with a lot of internet weathermen, which I guess you can consider me one of those, but no one really knows who I am. But I have the knowledge necessary to probably talk enough about this stuff in a reliable manner. The National Weather Service predicted a above normal, above average season this year for hurricanes. As you can see, it hasn't really lived out to the expectation. And sometimes this does happen, but also keep in mind we still have quite a ways of the season left to go, and it runs all the way till November 30th. As I said, and as we've noticed, it has been quiet lately, and when it's quiet, some content creators who rely on these events don't have content. And something I've noticed, and with some creators like Ryan Hall, now I have like absolute respect for Ryan Hall, and I watch his videos all the time, and I actually use his content and his live streams whenever I'm chasing tornadoes, which I've only done once so far. But I guess I don't like the way that he kind of worded it. And you also know, like, this section of content on YouTube uses a lot of flashy colors and alarming thumbnails that draw attention. And Ryan was kind of emphasizing that parade of hurricanes, we'll call it, that the GFS was throwing, as well as that one that was looking like it was going to hit Florida when those models are so far out. And he was saying, I think we're going to be talking about the tropics a whole lot more in the coming weeks here, which might be true, but not because of the exact reason that he's highlighting. There's another YouTuber I watch who, he hadn't been uploading in a bit because not a lot of activity. Even here back at home, there hasn't been much besides out in the Dakotas where there was some severe weather. He was like, oh, well, we still have a whole ways left of the hurricane season. And even then, if that doesn't happen, we got winter weather to look forward to. So, a lot of people started watching me because of that. And it was just kind of like, it seems like, they're more worried about just getting content and getting into the algorithm right rather than just talking about the weather. I believe these people like talking about the weather. I believe they care about helping people. They absolutely do. But it's just like on their minds, it's like you start seeing their videos get less views because there's less activity. And so they start grasping onto any possibility of severe weather happening, even though that's not the likely situation. Now, even though I have only just started making weather analysis videos and no one knows who I am at this time, I also, pretty much all of my thumbnails that I have made so far are that kind of almost, probably not as flashy, but flashy and alarming style. For I am a hypocrite. The reason why people do that is because it's so hard. Like I said, it's so hard to get anyone's attention because everyone's attention span is just dog water nowadays. We're so just addicted to quick dopamine hits and TikToks and quick reels that we can't just sit down and like watch an in-depth scoop on things. So it's hard for people like me to like start making content and get traction going, and it's really annoying, frankly, because we have a lot to say and talk about, and it's not just weather that I also have to talk about. There's other stuff that I do and I really want to, but no one gives a shit. And the right people would, but YouTube's not going to promote your video if it doesn't do well the first 48, 72 hours, and then so you have to draw people's attention with something that's a little more exaggerated, and I hate it, honestly, I really do. But I guess that is to get people to watch the video, but I kind of take things with more of a grain of salt whenever I'm talking about what it is that I highlighted in the thumbnail. Like, I'm realistic about it. And honestly, frankly, most of these people I'm talking about also are more realistic, and they're not, most of it is just clickbait. I just feel like Ryan Hall kind of emphasized those ghost storms a little too much because I do not expect them to happen. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you, my prediction, honestly, is we'll probably see 1 to 2 storms impact the U.S., maybe 3 by the time the season ends. This could also end up being one of those seasons where just every single storm was a fish storm, and we just get nothing. And that happens sometimes. And even more unusual, this specific time of the year, it's just like there's nothing really happening. And it is really weird. But as we go further into September and then into October, you can probably expect less stuff from the main development region further over near Africa, and then more stuff coming from the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. But as of now, there is nothing certain coming from that area, so we're just a tip, keep an eye more on that area as we go into this part of the year. That was that hype bias I was talking about. Like I said, it was kind of, there was an obvious, like, cling to whatever info or interesting point they could get to make content. And it just so happens to be one of the things they use was that bias area that GFS hangs on to, and usually throws out forecast storms that never happen. But like I said, even if these storms don't pan out, the Gulf and the Caribbean are expected to ramp up going into late in the season. So just keep an eye on that. So that was my rant, I guess you can call it. We're going to go back to home and get a brief look at what things look like now and going forward. All right, so these are current conditions back at home, and you can see a whole plethora of things going on, mostly dominated by high pressure. Besides in the central plains and western Texas, we do have some heavy rain occurring because of a frontal boundary. There's actually an occluded section there that's causing those heavy rains, but elsewhere it's just scattered thunderstorms. Before we continue into present conditions, there is something that I actually wanted to talk about, because I did not get a chance to, because I just didn't make a video on it, and I'd had some other stuff going on. So last week, the end of last week, now a week ago, today's Saturday, this was Friday going into Saturday. Actually, this specific image was going into Friday. We had Lorena over near Baja California, which is where it made landfall. I think at that time it was a tropical storm. Yes, at that time it was a tropical storm. I remember the models now. What was left of it made its way past Mexico and into the southwest and some parts of Texas, which brought moisture over here in this area. We can just do that, moisture, draw a big M there. And as this cold front was moving in, it was interacting with that moisture. This generated some thunderstorms here in Texas. And we actually kind of saw some interesting, I remember noting some pretty interesting cloud formations. What looked like you could see as this front right here made its way over us and out into the Gulf, you could kind of see where that front was, because there was just so much upward activity going on, a lot of really beautiful fluffy cumulus clouds. And I actually got a shot of them with my drone, and you can see, I feel like maybe you could see almost where the jet stream was dipping down. It was just really cool, because there's just that point where it starts in your own vicinity. Everything north, it's more calm, but you look south, you see just all these fluffy towering cumulus and eventually cumulonimbus clouds, and it was really cool. And I think that was on Saturday specifically, but this is a forecast map from that Friday. Now we can see what's left of that frontal boundary that made its way all the way out here into Cuba and southeast of Florida. It has been stationary, and it was causing showers and thunderstorms, and currently still is causing some showers over Florida, the Florida peninsula. But most of the United States is currently dominated by high pressure ridges, and that is what is limiting most of the activity, and that is actually what is going to and already is causing what was a nice cool down back to essentially we'll just call it a mild scorch. So end of last week, I had walked outside and I was like, oh, wow, it's in the 60s here, which is that for us here in Southeast Texas, that's a sign that fall is coming. It may not sound like much to other people living in northern states, but that's a sign. Not a very big one, but a sign. Call it a gentle nudge. But that was from the trough that came in and brought in a lot of Canadian cold air, and what's left of that, as you can see, made its way southeast, and now going forward, that is going to die off, and actually presently there is a high pressure ridge coming from Canada all the way into the southern plains, and that's going to bring us some hotter weather for the next few days. So these are present conditions with temperature anomalies. As you can see, it's already pretty far above average, actually even more so up into the Midwest and the Great Plains. Going forward, you can see that trend just continues. And so we're going to see some more summer-like weather again. As you can see, going forward, that swath of warmer air kind of persists, especially about a week ahead, probably a little less than a week ahead, might cool off a little bit. I think we can probably expect through the rest of most of the rest of September, probably some hotter weather, but as we get into October, of course, it'll start cooling off in most places. But I will kind of update more on the fall-like weather as we get a few more days ahead, because things are subject to change after a few days pass. So what all this is going to do is mostly bring us just some scattered rainstorms throughout the Great Plains, and then even some rain into the Carolinas and Florida going to Tuesday. And then we'll actually look at the Euromodel and see what it thinks. I think there is a frontal boundary that's out there that's causing more rainstorms, but it's expecting a little low pressure system to move off of that probably a shortwave trough in the jet stream that's advancing, and probably a frontal boundary. And that will bring showers and moisture to the Carolinas and Virginia. And looking at the next 2 days, just to kind of solidify that, you can see those scattered showers along the East Coast up into the Carolinas, and then eventually Virginia going into Tuesday morning. Yeah, so that's actually forming because of that stationary front that's still out there that I talked about earlier. So that's what you can expect over the next few days. Like I said, the latest image here is weather for up to Tuesday, 8 a.m. So bottom line is, in the tropics, right now things are a bit too dry to be alarmed, but going into late September, the Caribbean and the Gulf could probably turn the tables, and we will probably see an uptick in tropical activity, but nothing to be alarmed of right now, and there are no expected parade or train of storms to make their way in just yet, if at all. The weather has been pretty tame lately, and it is really weird. It kind of feels like we're just like we're setting up for something big, you know, because it's like the quiet before the storm. Like instinctively, you kind of look at it, and it's like, this is unusual. What's gonna happen? Maybe the Earth is just like taking a big inhale, and it's just getting ready to just let it all release, like poof, just bring an absolute devastating storm. It's not gonna happen. I'm just joking. Or will it? I am the storm bringer after all. That's actually, I meant to make that funnier. It's just more cringy now at this point. So that concludes everything I have for today on this fine September evening. So I hope you found this video useful. I'm probably actually not going to get this video up until what will be the 14th. I'm still a one-man team right now, and I'm looking to get some people to edit my videos for me so I can make this a little bit more streamlined and have a better workflow. But I will continue to update as things develop, and that's all for now. Take care and stay safe out there.
There's another one walking over. Oh no, there's a couple coming over here. It's actually a Mexican over there. You see them? It's like right next to each other. Oh, there's another one.